Welcome to Moving Iron with Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, the podcast for anyone and everyone involved and interested in the business of ag equipment. If you want to understand what trends and market forces are impacting the price of your iron, you've come to the right place. Buckle up, it's time to move some iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. I got Greg Machinery Pete Peterson on to talk about what's happening in the world of auctions and equipment. But before that, I want to thank John Deere for being the sponsor for this edition of Moving Iron Podcast. Greg, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Casey. How about you?
Doing good, man. Doing good. There's a flurry of activity. This is that time of the year where, like we talked about last week, this is that point in time where it kind of sets a tone for what's happening at the end of the year. And as we take a look at the auction marketplace, there's no lack of activity.
Yeah, plenty of sales. We were busy this weekend as we're recording this. It's would have been 2-3 days ago. We were filming an auction in Northeast Iowa for the TV show. Really nice farm auction, and we're watching another big auction, farm auction across the state of Iowa, west central Iowa. So yeah, lots going on. Real interesting time out there for sure.
For sure, yeah. There's like we were talking about before we started recording. We were talking about we had strength in the marketplace and where things are headed at. And you had a pretty good estimate come through when you were talking to an auction company, and it actually went beyond what they thought. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was a sale Saturday. It was out in Mapleton, Iowa, Casey. It was by Iowa Machinery Man. It was a retirement sale for Al Brune, and I had the opportunity last week to go out and visit with Al, sat at his kitchen counter there for about 2 hours visiting. And I think a couple trends kind of to look at with this sale. One, Al's a great guy, scratched his way up his whole career, got up to 13,000 acres, rented acres. Retirement sale, but there was some lending pressure there. So we are seeing more of that. So it is an interesting market right now. There's some speculation there might be some more level of farm auctions end of the year. I think that probably will be true, but we'll have to wait and see. But Al's sale was really interesting. When you looked at the sale bill, everyone thought Al was a custom operator, because he had, 6 John Deere 70 series Hilco side hills, 4 9770s and a pair of 9870s. And then he had 4 18 model 8345Rs, 3 18 model 8370Rs, but he just had a big operation. So the sale did very well. Randy Pryor, our auctioneer friend there, works with Iowa Machinery Man. Randy's been in it for decades. Randy's seen everything. He said their estimate was 3.7 million and it did 4.2 million. So, I think, again, a little bit like we've been talking about, folks aren't buying new so much right now. We'll understand the forces at work there, but we're a ways into this now. I mean, all of last year basically was kind of a sliding downward. So if you're not buying new, I think what people are looking for is the best condition used. I did have another interesting conversation last week. Curious to get your thoughts on it, Casey, but we were filming another auction across the state in Northeast Iowa. And we did a filming segment with Brad Graff, the owner of Valley Transportation Service. I think Brad's out of Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Great outfit. Yep. They started the same year I did, 1989. I think they're just under 200 rigs hauling on the construction equipment all over the 48 continental U.S. states. And Brad said, Pete, the last couple of years have been bad, just slow, not good. But he said just here of late, here in 25, that things have picked up. I think he said there were when we visited him last week on Thursday, he said they had 179 out of their 190 some rigs were out on the road. And I think trucking tends to be kind of a interesting
indicator. Yeah.
A lead indicator, right, on some economic activity. So, it was an interesting week last week. Yeah.
Yeah, they had what you're talking about there, that was a 13.5% increase over what they thought it was going to be on that auction, from 3.7 to 4.2, which is when you're having an auction, every dollar counts, right? So it's a good indicator of where things are headed. That being said, Valley Transportation over there, those guys over there, Brad and those guys over there, do a great job. When I was at the dealership, they were my go-to. There was great group of guys when it came to trucking. moving equipment all over, especially they just know the equipment, so it's just
They do.
easy. It's the easy button, right?
Brad grew up as a farm boy, and he actually worked in there was a company back when he was a teenager, late 70s, I think. Or no, I'm trying to remember the years. But there was an outfit called Minnesota Implement and Midwest Auction. And he used to line up machinery on those for old Conrad Clement, who just passed away recently.
Yeah.
Guy that owned Featherlight Trailers. But so Brad and his team, yeah, they know farmers and they do good work.
Yep, they do. But when you're having that conversation with guys and you're talking to you about, hey, we guessed this and it came in that way, you see one sale, that's, is that a trend line now, or is that whatever? When you start seeing more of that kind of thing happening, it's starting to lead to what we see moving around. Now, where I think the market is kind of moving a little bit now, we're starting to see some churning a little bit. If you look where four-wheel drives are at, now they're not on fire by any means, but you're seeing more people being interested in that. I've always had this theory that during no-till farming, there's a point in time when you have to go back in and kind of either minimal till or do something to kind of break up hard pans and weed pressure and those kind of things, and you start seeing this sprayer kind of fade a little bit, demand spray a little bit, and then you start seeing four-wheel drive demand pick up, and then as that kind of phases out a little bit, you see sprayers come back, four-wheel drives kind of go back to the on the other side of the spectrum. But the difference between four-wheel drives now and where they've been at is they're a bigger, more accepted tool on the farming operation. You see a lot of guys planting with them. You see tillage and you see obviously tillage and grain cart activity, those kind of things, because grain carts now are, I think you can put an entire field in a grain cart now, if I remember right. And they're getting to be there's some big bushels out there going into those grain carts. But when you're looking at that look, what have you been seeing on the auction block as far as four-wheel drive goes? What kind of activity you see with that?
Well, we had an very interesting one Saturday. The sale we filmed, Casey. It was in Lime Springs, Iowa, which would be south of me. I live in Rochester, Minnesota, southeast corner of Minnesota, so you just drive south about an hour. This sale was by Joel's Tractors and Auction out of Strawberry Point. It was a very interesting sale. It was a guy had passed away, Harry Blackburn. I think he was like 83. And Harry had off the farm businesses. He had a farm toy and coin shop for years. I can't remember if it was Decorah or Dyersville, but very successful guy. And his farm wasn't very big, but his equipment was amazing. And I think he retired shortly after, like 5-6 years ago, and had purchased equipment. I don't know if it was for tax purposes, but on the sale, he did have a four-wheel drive. How about this? A 16 model 9420R, 122 hours on it. So unusual, 9 years old, and was a bareback. So a lot of speculation what's it going to bring. I think, if I'm remembering right, I'd only seen a handful smash over 300K. Back at the top of the market at 22, we did see one. I think it was up like 367 or something. But this thing, again, it was a bareback. It wound up selling for 320, which I thought was pretty good. A lot of people at the sale were thinking based on the hours that it would go higher. But again, I think it was bareback that kind of hurt it a little bit. But generally speaking, I think the four-wheel drives definitely eased off last year in 24 auction pricing. But I would say that the pre-def ones in good condition, we'll still see a few of those come through, kind of eye-opening numbers. Not quite as high as they were back in 21 and 2, but pretty solid. So, 24 was readjustment, and I'd say maybe finding some footing here early in 25.
Yeah, that feels like that too. I mean, you look at where things are kind of moving towards. We're seeing more of that activity definitely take place. Let's talk a little bit about, because where we're at right now, this is another peak time. You see some row crop tractors get picked up for fall and obviously moving into next year. I guess as you're looking at that marketplace, what's your feel for row crop tractors right now?
Well, based on the horsepower, I think some different things. I know our friends at DPA Auctions had a sale, would have been early last week. Can't remember if we touched on it maybe last week. You get old like me, Casey, you kind of forget. But they had a pair of, I think, 24 model 8R 280s. So on the lower side of horsepower there. And they sold pretty well, quite a bit above the average price. I think they were 11 to 1400 hours, something like that. And we did see a number of 8R410s last week at auction. I think maybe Sullivan Big Iron had a few of those. And I think they had a pair. Can't remember if they were 23 miles. They brought 365 each. It would be just under the average. I think they had a little higher hours on them, though. There is one auction that we're 2 days from now, as we're recording this, I'm really be watching in, again, back to Iowa, in Merrill, Iowa, a Zomer company in real estate. On the red side, they've got some low-hour stuff. They got a 20 model Magnum 340, 446 hours. 21 Magnum 310, 429 hours. 13 model Magnum 315, 1,705 hours. I think that could be a hot sale. But, yeah, again, I think, to me, the high horse tractors, 2024 was just, there was such volume out there at auction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that just, the sheer volume drove down the pricing. And now when we look at our auction price data, we're seeing things like, I know on an 8R410, I think it's 33% less we've seen sold at auction through the month of June here versus last year. And I think the 8R280s, it was like 60% less number sold versus last year. So, I think dealers have kind of hit the pause button there. Will it pick up? We're starting to see some dealer auctions pop in, but kind of just, it feels to me like they're kind of putting out like smaller lines. Like you might see us with like 45 items on it.
Right.
So 5-7 tractors, a few planters. Versus last year, it was like, whoa, this dealer auction has 24 combines on it.
Yeah, they were using a shovel to take that stuff out of the dealership.
Yeah. So it's just a little more regulated, I think, as we get to mid-25.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you're looking at how that moves along, I think you made a great point. Something I'm going to pay attention close to as well is that number of farm sales compared to consignment sales. I think that's going to see a big flip, and which it's not good for anybody if they have to sell under distress, but it's good for the marketplace because those typically bring more money than what you see on a consignment sale. But those lines are so blurred anymore, Greg. It's hard to tell. I mean, part of that stuff is on an online sale, like, take a big iron sale, for example, like that. And there might be 10 or 15 pieces from a specific farmer on there, but there's another, 150 pieces around it that are just kind of a hodgepodge of consignment things around that. So the lines are blurred so much now that it's not like it used to be when a consignment sale was a consignment sale and farm sale was a farm sale and, so on and so forth. Those things have all, because of the online activity, have kind of smashed that stuff together, which, probably not a bad thing. It's you're kind of evening that stuff out a little bit. So the market's not so top heavy and bottom heavy.
Yeah, I think you're right, Casey. I think there's different, some you could call it wordsmithing. A farmer downsizing. Again, I never heard that before, but now you'll see our friends at Steffes Group do a ton of them. They're great. They'll just have a farmer selling like 10 pieces, and you read from afar, you look at that and you go, oh, well, it's probably just, keeping your lender happy, which is totally understandable. The sale out in Mapleton on Saturday was quote unquote a farm retirement sale, which it was, but again, there was financial pressure involved. So it is really interesting. I think there's still strong balance sheets out there across ag country for the older farmers. And one of the things when I talk to the investment community, they're always asking, hey, what are the canaries in the coal mine for movement either up or down? And one of the things that I say is, the old money factor. I don't mean to be derogatory about that, but, just smart farmers who are older, who've had good years and have really strong balance sheets. What I see, that money still gets deployed situationally. So in fact, that sale Saturday in Mapleton with all the late model big stuff, Al also had a restored 1968 International 756 German diesel. And we did a preview video with him last week, and he was very emotional. He talked about it. That was a favorite tractor of his grandfather's. So anyway, this thing comes up for sale, and, doing my thing, I've seen a bazillion of them sold. Al's went for $29,000, which was $8,000 over the highest 756 I've ever seen. So to me, that's old money going, yep, I like 756s, muscle tractors. I have the money, I'll spend it. if that money starts pulling back, and to me, the two areas I watch are the vintage tractors, maybe end up into the 80s, and then also just the good pre-def tractors. If that starts pulling back, that means even the strong balance sheets are getting pinched. And so, with all the uncertainty out there right now we're just later. Well, I don't mean to laugh at all. Layering in possible war to whatever extent that is, price of fuel. Farmers don't need and dealers don't need any more uncertainty. So,
No.
as it stands now, what it feels to me like is all this uncertainty is pushing people into used markets.
Right.
And again, I think we touched on it last week, but Edmunds just came out and released their used vehicle mid 25 assessment. And they said used cars are up 2.3% in value this year.
Yep.
And the average age of them has gone from 7.3 years to 7.6 last year. So people are holding them longer and they're worth more. So I think we're seeing a little bit of the same thing with used farm equipment.
Yep. And I think we're in for that. We're in for that long haul, I think, a little bit. Like we're looking at the opportunity to start to see things moving up, and price wise. But we also need to watch the commodity market here. If you watch for price of corn's been lately, it's been sliding quite a bit, and there's a lot of volatility on the horizon across the board. Saw a huge run up in wheat last week, 20-cent jump on Thursday last week, if I remember right, and we're watching the corn price slide, and there's a lot of geopolitical stuff going on in the world right now, and it's really casting a shadow on some stuff, good or bad, some good, some bad. So
yeah.
We'll
What was interesting Saturday with the auction we filmed in Lime Springs was an in-person auction, which of course is super fun. We love online auctions, but for TV purposes, it's more fun to have a real auction. But
right.
What I love, it was a huge crowd with that low hourly equipment, of course. And there was a bunch of pre-def stuff. There was a record price on a 09 John Deere 7230 premium two-wheel, went for $94,500. Record price on 09 Deere 325 skid steer, 124 hours, did one for $36,000. So people were there and they were chattering. And so it was interesting, beyond what everything sold for, just to kind of pick up the vibe. And you could definitely hear that belt tightening theme, which, if you go to a farm show now or whatever, that just is what it is. But again, it's interesting when it gets to kind of nut cutting time and here's this thing selling. What it bring? Is that price up? Is it down? So the one item that maybe felt a little soft, it was an unusual item, but it was a combine. It was a 18 model Deere S760, which you don't see many of those smaller S760s. And it was a Hilco side hill. But it only had 70 engine hours on it, 7 years old. I thought it would creep over 300. It brought 297, which nothing to sneeze at on a 7-year-old combine for 297, of course, but was absolutely like new. But your buying pool is thinned out with a Hilco sometimes. So,
yep, that is true. The Hilco combine is it's a different animal. You got to find the right person that farms on the side of a hill, because most places where I've grown up at, there aren't too many hills to farm on side.
No hills where I grew up either.
So it's a tight marketplace, but when you do find that person, they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, it can cut both ways, right? And It was really interesting that sale in Mapleton Saturday, selling 6 70 series. Hilco's. I'm trying to remember. I think the highest one was 87.5, had like 2,687 hours on an 11 model. Those are engine hours. Down to 60K for one with like 5,300 engine hours. But tough assignment for any auctioneer to sell, 3 of something, but 6 of something.
Right.
That's off to Iowa Machinery, man. They had a heck of a sale there Saturday. But
for sure.
Again, like I think 2 episodes ago, Casey, you brought up the topic of what to do if you're having a farm auction. And they followed the plan step by step here, because they did a video preview. I went down and interviewed Al, and when you can see the farmer seller talking about his equipment, and Al's, just a great dude, and it was very emotional. you're selling your life's work. It's tough.
Right.
But, and he when he was talking about the Hilcos, he had a stack of service records that was literally that thick, and he pulled them into the shot, and I started smiling. I'm like, yeah, that was perfect, because they worked with Van Wall, great John Deere dealer there.
Mm-hmm.
Called up his guy, and they had all the service records, and they had kind of higher hours, but he said, Pete, these things, they were my babies. We had to keep them going. So when potential buyers hear Al say that, that's why I wasn't necessarily surprised that sale went that 13% over the projected, because you're buying Al.
Yeah, and you got to tell that story. You know what I mean? I think that's the one thing about service history is it's one thing for me to tell you, Greg, as a sales guy, this guy took care of his stuff. Well, you would expect me to say that, right? You're not going to say like this guy, took a baseball bat to everything you had and before he started it, and made sure that he put it away completely, trashed at the end of the year.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you've got to really say that story. But when you, like you said, like when the owner gets up and says, I had to make sure these things are running, and here's what I did to it, so you can see that, and this is what I made sure every year that downtime cost me money, and I wanted to make sure these things were well taken care of, and that changes the landscape of anyone's buying decision when you start looking at that.
It does. If you boil it down, auctions are funny. We deal with them our whole lives, but really, if you stop and step back and you look at what an auction is, it's a bunch of individuals deciding, do I want to bid one more time?
Right.
So what is in your power as either the seller or the auction company to, again, you should not be trying to pull wool over the eyes, but just, basically emotionally engaged. The reason auctions are still a viable way of selling assets is because they're emotional events, and we're humans. You can try not to be emotional and say, well, I'm not going over 100K. And I tip my hat to people that can stick to that. But at the same time, again, like you said, that's why hearing Al talk, when I explain this to farmers, when we go out and they're having an auction, I say, I'd love to get a little video of you. And God bless them, 98% of farmers say, oh, Pete, they're just uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about how good their tractor is. And I say, that's not what I'm asking you to do. I just want you to tell me about it, good, bad, or ugly. And when other farmers see you kind of just being real, being Casey, talking about your stuff, I tell the farmer, it's like you're grabbing them by the collar and you're pulling them through the screen. So now they're face to face, and you're just having a cup of coffee or a beer, going, "Hey, you field cultivator, whatever," and that makes that person more likely to click that thing 2 more times, and that's why your sale prices go up.
Yep, for sure. Got to tell that story. That's what it all comes down to every time.
You should. If for those who aren't telling it, you're just missing an opportunity, and that's why I worked, so hard the last 16 years on social media to build out this real estate, so that we can tell stories about what stuff sold for, but also on the front end, which is really fun to tell the story of a Harry Blackburn from Lime Springs, Iowa, who had a coin shop. I was down there and people were saying, oh yeah, we worked with Harry for years buying toys, and it's personal. And so, yes, you're selling assets, but this was Harry's 325 skid steer, and auctioneer Joel Everett was great. When they got to the skid steer, and again, it brought 36K. It was a 325, 16 years old with only 124 hours. But beyond that, Joel and John Anderson, his sales manager, they're like, now look at this skid steer, folks. This thing has every single bell and whistle. And there was one particular configuration, I think they pilot control or something. They were like, nobody got that back then, but Harry did. And here it is, and it's brand new. So that kind of depth, and when you combine with the personal knowledge, that's when you set a record by, in that case, it was 28.5 and they did 36. So.
Right. Yep. Well, there's that old saying, tell your story or somebody else will. And you want to be able to control that narrative as much as you can.
Absolutely.
Right on. Greg, probably a good place to stop. Folks want to have you come speak at their next event. Easy way to do that, just to go to machinerypete.com and click the contact button, and
Yep.
we'll get people in touch with you.
Right on our website. Just drop us a note, folks, or hit me on social media. I'm out there smashing away every day, sharing stuff. So, yeah, we've got a few coming up this summer, but always fun to get out and around the country and talk to people.
Right on. We're also going to be together August 21st in Rochester, your hometown. You don't have to go anywhere, Greg. You just have to show up.
Oh,
and you'll be
right
out there
down to the Civic Center. That'll be fun.
Right now. Yeah, we'll be down there doing part of the Yield Academy, Farm Journal Yield Academy, after the crop tour. And Greg and I will be recording a podcast down there, as well as doing a couple different presentations on what we see happening in the marketplace. So if you're in the area, love to have you stop by and talk to us, ask us some questions or whatever you might have, or just come be a part of the of what's going on there. But I think it'll be a good time, Greg.
Oh, it'll be fantastic. Our friend Chip Flory will be there, and I think Tyne Morgan will probably be there filming for U.S. Farm Report. But the Yield Academy throughout the day, we'll have some breakouts and super fun. So come join us in Rochester, folks.
For sure. Also, if you're interested in your dealership and you want to come to the Moving Iron Summit, that's in Austin, Texas this year. That'll be September 24th through the 26th down there. And if you look to do that, go to a Farm Journal under the events page. You can see Moving Iron. You can click there and get registered and see what the agenda looks like. So check that out. Look forward to having everybody come up there again. Look forward to that every year. And it's a good time to catch up with old friends and new friends and see what's going on in the marketplace and get everyone's opinion from across the country, which oddly enough, it's not the same. You hear a lot of different stuff across that spectrum.
Right. I think actually, will our friend Brad Graff and Valley, I know they've been down to you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they'll be there. Yeah, those guys will be there, and it'll be a good they've been a long-standing sponsor of the Moving Iron podcast for a long time, as well as Moving Iron Summit. I want to say they've been a part of that for, I don't know, since 2015, 2014 timeframe, something like that. So coming up on 10 years. So, yeah.
Amanda in their office, just we were doing an interview with them for the TV show. We said, Amanda, can you find us some old pictures of Brad? He's my age when he got started in 1989. And she just sent us some awesome images of some of their first trucks. I think Brad, his first truck was a Volvo. But at Moving Iron, a chance to visit with Brad and Parker Johnson, those guys from Valley. Yeah. You learn a ton, and it can help your dealership a tremendous amount, like you were saying. So just good people.
It's easy to get caught in an echo chamber, and you have other people you can talk to. You know, what's happening in Iowa, it's not happening in Georgia, it's not happening in Arizona. So it's a good time to see where those things happen. But eventually, all those things that are happening in all those different places eventually make it to your doorstep at your dealership. So it's good to see what's going on with what's going on there.
Yeah, the opportunity as a dealer to learn about what's happening in the Southeast, maybe opportunities for different horsepower ranges, stuff you have. And so, tremendous. What you created there is just an awesome event, Casey.
I appreciate that, Greg. Thank you. Thanks for being a part of it over you've been on there, I've had you speak there 2 or 3 times. So
been fun. Looking forward to Austin. That'll be good.
Yeah,
you can't get us tickets to a UT football game, can you?
Oh, I bet we could figure something out if we try.
I don't know if they're home that weekend, but always fun to go to Austin.
Yeah, Austin's a good time. So we'll look forward to that, Greg. We'll catch you again next week.
You bet. Have a good week, Casey.
All right, stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Looking for more accuracy, more productivity from your current planter? Let's get exact with precision upgrades from John Deere. Start with Exact Emerge and get accurate singulation and spacing at 10 miles per hour. Or choose Exact Shot to promote early root growth and cut fertilizer costs. And with Furrow Vision, save time by verifying seed depth right from your cab. Visit johndeere.com/planner upgrades and see why nothing runs like a Deere.
Farm Journal is going to hold the first ever Yield Academy for 2025. It's going to happen August 21st in Rochester, Minnesota. Listen to this group. Real advice from folks who walked out in the fields. Ken Ferry, David Hula, Randy Dowdy, and we will get some market outlook from Dan Bossi at Ag Resources as well, get the latest on what's working in agronomy, equipment, and marketing today. And that is the last day of Crop Tour 2025. So stick around for the final meeting that night in Rochester. Just Google Farm Journal Yield Academy, and that will take you to the homepage for the event.
All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast Markets. I got Chip Nellinger here from Blue Reef Agri Marketing to talk about what's happening in the marketplace. Chip, how you doing today?
Hey, doing well, Casey. Thanks for
Good.
having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. A few things happened since we talked last. So we've got about three big things that really happened. One, we saw last Thursday, I believe. We saw the price of wheat jump up 20 cents. Went from being pretty mild, no real indicators anything crazy was going to happen. All of a sudden, boom, we had a 20% jump or 20-cent jump in the price of wheat. It's been kind of teetering back and forth since then. But I guess if you're looking at that, Chip, what was the big hubbub about the 20 cents?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's all about short covering. The funds have had a pretty hefty short position built up in wheat, really for the better part of 3 years. They've made a lot of money being short wheat. We've seen the market, in the case of wheat, 6 or 8 times just in the last probably 12 to 18 months, rise up to a point, just touching some key moving averages where if we would follow through to the upside, it would run the funds out of some additional shorts. But every time it's failed, and it looks at this stage to have failed again. So it's a little bit disappointing. I think a lot of it was just going into the weekend, all the uncertainties with the tensions in Iran, Israel. Were we going to get involved, as the United States? And obviously, after the fact, it's now known that we did. So I think at the end of the day, it was a lot of short covering. The funds have made a lot of money being short wheat. And maybe just had a little bit too big of a position. Also, there was some talk maybe about some, too much moisture in the plains, particularly parts of Oklahoma, the panhandle of Texas, receiving some pretty large rainfall amounts, really at the wrong time. It's not really when you want rain, unfortunately, for the wheat crop as you're just about to enter into harvest. So that was maybe an excuse for some of that short covering. I think at the end of the day, it was just funds had money made, uncertainty about geopolitical events, armed conflict happening between Israel and Iran, and they ran for the exits on at least a portion of their position and put some money in their pockets there.
What's up?
Okay. So we've watched corn over the last 2 to 3 weeks just kind of get chipped away. We'll lose 4 or 5 or 6 cents, gain back a couple. Today we've seen a big sell off in corn. I guess as you're looking at corn right now, are we just looking at the weather right now where everybody believes everything's perfect and we're at that weather in that part of the weather pattern?
Yeah, I think it's that easy. We're coming into the end of June, 80, close to 85% good to excellent crop conditions in Iowa. Some hot weather, definitely some of the hottest weather we've seen of the year and maybe even of the last couple of years. But most areas receive some beneficial rainfall ahead of the heat, and there's plenty of rain forecasted after this heat. So, if it's 5, 6 days at 95-degree temps and 80+% humidity, and you had rain ahead of it and rain coming after it, it's about an ideal prescription for a corn crop right now. And so at the end of the day, it's all about that. Until there is some sort of a turn for the worse, either on crop conditions or a threatening forecast in there for pollination and grain fill, which is still ahead of us, the market's just going to assume that we're going to hit this 181 trend line yield. And the funds are short. They use every intraday bounce to add to their shorts. And so right now, the path of least resistance is definitely for lower in corn. It's all based on the forecast and a lack of a threat right there. Here yet this afternoon, we'll get an update on crop conditions. But until you see a change in the forecast or a drop in crop conditions, unfortunately, it looks like the pressure is still going to remain on the corn market.
Okay. So I've been watching the cattle market here just because of where it's at, and we're really starting to see some real volatility move in the cattle marketplace, more so than we've seen over the last couple of months. We're seeing some pretty big swings, $1.25 to 85 cents swing. I mean, in intraday swings. I mean, it's just big swings out there. Looking at that, are we setting up for that big dip we've been talking about for the past 2.5 years, or is this another one of those symptoms of where the market's at right now?
Yeah, I think for now a symptom. The problem, we are setting it up, Casey. We're going to have a $20 break at the drop of a hat at some point. You, me, no one else out there has the silver, the magic ball, the silver bullet to figure out when that is. That will come eventually, but we won't be able to predict it. Packers were able to talk down the cash market a little bit a week ago. Also, again, like the wheat market, funds have been big longs in cattle, and with all the uncertainty of this conflict in the Middle East, why not take some profit? So I think you saw a combination there. does look like maybe some early indications this week are for maybe a touch lower cash, but we still have the problem we've always had out there: tight supplies. The cattle on feed report Friday kind of indicated same thing. No major surprises there, but no shocks either. We really have a situation developed here where we've got extremely tight supplies of cattle. And the thing about that's maybe a little bit of a silver lining that could help us out is as you look at the August contract, which is now the front month in live cattle. We've got I guess 10 days or less left on the June live cattle contract. August is still a bigger discount yet than what the June is. So you're sitting out here in that August contract, and even if the cash breaks a little bit, you have such a huge discount on the August live cattle futures that we don't really have to break a lot. So one day it will happen, probably sooner rather than later, that we're going to get this, just death-defying, nauseous break in the market. But if we just slowly let the air out a little bit of the cash market, the big discount is going to be something that helps kind of cushion the blow a little bit. Eventually, there will be a shift there on basis, and the premium between cash and futures will flip. But right now, it does provide a little bit of a cushion out there if the cash does continue to break the next couple of weeks.
Yep. We've been talking about this for 2 years, man. Like this is, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And it just like every time we see something like this start to happen, the snowball start to form, it falls apart. But this time it just feels a little bit different than the times in the past.
Yeah, it does feel like that a little bit. And, we've talked about this as well. High price, record high price beef, eventually that will do its job, right? I mean, the old saying that's kind of tongue in cheek, the cure for low prices is low prices, because it stimulates demand, and eventually the demand overcomes the supply and we rally. The cure for high prices is high prices, meaning we're going to stay high enough, long enough to start, eating into demand. And that may in fact be what's happening in the cattle market, in the beef market. I know I was up in Chicago here recently. We live just about 2.5 hours southwest of Chicago. I was up there a week or so ago, looked at a nice steak place to eat. Looked online,
Yeah.
$90 to $110 steaks out there, right? I chose Italian, right? It's not maybe as good for my waistline, but it's certainly cheaper. And so eventually demand will get hurt, unfortunately, because it takes a while to get that demand back when it does. But that probably is how this thing ends, is eventually we will crumble demand, and that will kind of recalibrate the market. But again, Casey, in walking in the streets of Chicago, our hotel was like a block away from Gibson Steakhouse, one of the better steak places in the country. It's full. You can't just walk in there and get a table. So far, it doesn't appear like we've cut demand terribly at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Chicago 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was,
What's up?
you typically, when I go to Chicago, there's such great steakhouses, so you got to go eat at one of them when you're there, right? And so I went there and by myself, and it was the same deal. I was going through the menu, going like, "Holy crap, this is $110 steak!" But me and the other 250 people in that place were all eating the same. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like a lack of. Again, if the place I could only I couldn't walk in and get a table, but I could walk in and sit at the bar, which is actually where I want to sit at anyway. So it worked that well for me. But as you're sitting there and you're sitting there looking at all these people, you're starting to say like, man, you would think for demand would start to slide, and it's not. But when you look over at the hog side of the business, you're starting to see prices kind of reflect that a little bit. Hey, maybe this is some of the nibbling away at some of the beef side. So as you're looking at the hog side of the business, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We have seen, I think, a nice increase in pork demand, right, as a competitive, cheaper source. Also, the poultry side, and I think there's only so far you can take those markets, but you're also seeing some health issues in the hog herd nationwide. And as you look out there at these summer month hogs, I mean, we're not at all-time highs, but certainly in the upper, probably 5% of all-time highs right now. Very quietly, everybody, all the focus is on record beef prices, record high cattle futures, record high feeder cattle, and very quietly the hog market's sitting out here saying, hey, We're well over $100 for summer month hogs. You look out even at next year, and producers with cheaper corn, cheaper meals on multi-year lows right now. It's a good sign out there for the hog industry. We are having some health issues that I've been told about that aren't real great right now. So that does obviously affect profitability. But that kind of creeping demand that is seeing shifting over from higher price record high beef is certainly helping pork and poultry right now.
For sure.
What's up?
All right, let's talk a little bit about energy. With the Iran situation that we're looking at right now, things have really escalated there. We saw a big run up in West Texas as well as Brent crude. As you watch how that's going out now, as this week has kind of settled down and things have kind of stepped back and take a look at what's going on. There's lots of reports out there about retaliation, this, that, and the other thing. But I've also read lots of articles about who actually has the amount of ammunition to keep things rolling. And it sounds like both sides are kind of on the short end of the stick when it comes to what they have left to shoot at each other. So you're starting to see the oil market kind of settle down a little bit. I guess as you're watching that market right now, Chip, what do you think's happening and where do you think things are going?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly, I like the geopolitical. I'm a political science and history minor, and so I enjoy that stuff. But I'm certainly not an expert. But what I can tell you is, as you look at the oil futures market, even overnight, after the United States got involved this past weekend and bombed those 3 nuclear sites, oil did open sharply higher, but it didn't hold very long. And then we had a huge reversal. Currently we're about $10 a barrel off of the overnight highs in crude oil. That is a massive move. Couple things there. I think it's telling you, to your point, that there's likely going to be kind of a de-escalation coming. Some of the news this afternoon from President Trump is those attacks on Saturday were kind of a one and done. They accomplished their goal. He's not looking to expand the fight, so to speak. There was a retaliatory attempt by Iran on U.S. Bases in Oman. It looked like that kind of failed, and sometimes that's more of a symbolic thing. So the crude oil and the energy markets are telling me, just by looking at what has happened here, that we will, in short order, have some de-escalation. It doesn't mean the bombs will end flying, but it does look like the market is not fearful of this thing, rapidly accelerating into, a world conflict. So that's good. But man, quite a bit of volatility, even the last 12 hours in the energy markets here.
Yeah, for sure. It's a crazy batch of things that are happening right now, and one thing on the energy side, the correlation between where the energy markets are at, oil markets are at, compared to where, like for example, the cattle markets are at. Cattle markets, should show the same markers for recession that the energy markets are showing, but they're totally inverse of each other, where you get this really high and people keep buying it, but you look at the oil marketplace and it's not like there's absolutely a supply problem there. I mean, there's a little bit of an oversupply issue, but at the same time, it doesn't react the same way. And I guess I just like your opinion on that as you look at those two markets and how they should correlate with each other.
Yeah, there is a lot of correlation in the cattle market with the general consensus of the economy and the stock market, right? There's probably more correlation with cattle in the stock market than there is with crude oil. But we're at such a kind of a unique point in history here where you're looking at the tightest supply of cattle we've ever had. On the one hand, driving us to record highs, but then kind of separately and independently, we've got this major conflict in the Middle East that's kind of added all this volatility to the energy markets. The other thing that the recent action here in the energy markets and the crude oil market may be telling you is that the world can't really sustain $80+ crude oil. It may not be a great sign overall on maybe what the situation is on the world economy, and sometimes that takes several months, maybe even a year plus, to sift out. So there could be multiple signals in here. But to your point, I mean, the cattle market definitely has one eye all the time on the economy in general. And so far, it looks like inflation has cooled a little bit. That's good news. but I think the consumer is out here fairly strapped as well. Obviously, we've had a tick higher in energy prices, gas prices, and so that'll be a little painful in the short run. So I don't know. I think that the crude oil market could be sending us some mixed signals. Potentially some warning flags about the world economy, and eventually, if that's the case, it will sift over, and we'll see a reflection in the cattle market because we talked earlier, the consumer has to drive that. The demand base has to be there to keep cattle prices and beef prices at record highs. And if that starts slipping, the attitudes can change very quickly. The funds will take their money out of that market. They've made tremendous money the last 3 years being long cattle and feeder cattle. They'll take that out quickly if there's any sign that they need to go to the exits, and that will be a huge rebalancing and very painful to get through as cattle producers out there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Chip, probably a good place to stop right there. If folks want to reach out to you, what's the easiest way to do that?
Yeah, easiest way is probably just call our Morton office. That's the main office, 309-550-7213. Grain market's a little depressing. Obviously, the cattle market's, hog market, little brighter out there, but there's always something that's happening, and always a way and a reason to help improve marketing and risk management plans. So call. We're happy to talk to you, and would love the conversation.
Well, Chip, appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Casey.
Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Well, there they are, mocking you.
See you next year, loser.
That weedy area that's got you thinking, man, I hate that spot. Wish I'd sprayed better. Get the last laugh with a sprayer upgrade from John Deere. Precision upgrades that can increase your sprayer's performance, like Exact Apply, advanced nozzles to give you more control at more speeds. It's just one of the many precision upgrades you'll find at johndeere.com. Now, let's see who's laughing.
All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. I got Eric Kaufman from John Deere here with us to talk about Gators. So, Eric, before we get talking about Gators too much, though, let's talk about yourself, how you got to where you're at today, and a little bit of your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Casey. Eric Halfman here. I'm the go-to-market manager for Gator utility vehicles at John Deere, and spent almost 27 years now with John Deere around the agriculture side of the business, around our turf side of the business. Really spent a lot of time with our dealer channel and our customers, and have some exciting topics today around Gators to talk to you about.
Yep. Gators are, when I think of a Gator, I'm thinking of, I'm going to throw a hay bale in the back. I'm going to go take care of the horses or do whatever it is you're going to go do, run around, little chore tractor type stuff. You're going to go out and take a bucket of this there and those other things. But, when I left the dealership, the thing that Gators were getting ready to, we're kind of slowly progressing into, and they just rolled it out with, where all of the AMS features or ISG features that you start seeing coming back into, that you see on tractors now are getting functionally put into Gators a little bit. I guess talk a little bit about that and the breadth and width that now the Gator can fit into to the farmers from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it. You saw Precision Ag Technologies really start to dabble on the Gator side of the business when you left the dealership, and we're full in now. Precision Technologies most certainly have changed the way we farm today, and with our new XUV 845 and 875 Gators, you can utilize integrated technology in those. So if you're thinking about the technology farmers have been using, you might think of Green Star Ready. That's an available option on our Gator utility vehicles now, as well as AutoTrack Ready options. There's most certainly benefits to each one of those options for our utility vehicles. Beyond the capability of the Gator to do normal chores and utilizing the cargo box, these new utility vehicles have really become a mobile workstation and help to guide our farmers to be more productive and efficient.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about that. So back in the day when we first started with AutoTrack and trying to boundary lines and those kind of things, guys would take a lap around the tractor, to kind of set up the boundary line and whatever else was out there. You started looking at your AB lines and how you're going to put that in there and tracking how those things are going to come through, and marking where the pivot wellhead is and all these different things that are out there, right? And they did it all inside of a tractor. But now you take a look where boundary mapping is now. You can do that with your Gator. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Gator utility vehicle offers a lightweight, a more agile, a machine that's meant to go over rough terrain, that has the suspension to do that at slow speeds and faster speeds. And it's really, if you think about boundary mapping, a machine that is almost built for that task. And establishing or verifying boundary lines is really what is the groundwork for a lot of the work farmers do today, right? When you think of variable rate applications, prescriptions, even autonomy, the boundary is very important for that. And why take a tractor out or utilize a sprayer when you can be a lot more accurate and be efficient, save money on fuel, and do that in comfort with an HVAC Gator utility vehicle.
Yep. And the hours are a lot cheaper too on a Gator than they are on a tractor or sprayer.
Yeah, absolutely. It all factors in.
Yeah, it does.
In all seriousness, yep.
It really does. So the other thing too that was about with Gators that I really found to be ironic, ironic's not the right word, but I guess in some way it is. But when you're looking at boundary lines and everything else, you can now auto track with a Gator. I guess talk about that and how am I going to use that on my farm?
Yeah, so from an auto track perspective, if that is another option, so you can order our Gators Green Star ready, and then add auto track, which really unlocks a lot of cool things. Spraying, tow behind spraying, or even a larger 90-gallon sprayer in the cargo box has the opportunity to rate control and section control, and utilizing that technology with the Gator. If you order auto track, you get an ISOBUS implement connector that really unlocks that. And again, a John Deere rate controller combined with that sprayer allows you to really be efficient and minimize overlapping. When auto track came to be, tillage applications and overlapping was really a big advantage for that option to start with, to get people's minds and arms around wrapping around the efficiencies and accuracies of that. But now with spraying, soil mapping, even just going out and utilizing lines with the Gator to check on crops and crop scouting to make sure you're not driving over those crops when you're driving in the fields.
Yep. So talk a little bit about integration with the operations center and how I can use my Gator with that.
Yeah, so this is really cool. A JD Link modem is required, and typically, if you're going to order Green Star ready or Auto Track ready with a Gator utility vehicle, you're gonna have a JD Link modem that really opens up an opportunity to connect with John Deere Operations Center. So as you're boundary mapping, spraying, that data can seamlessly transfer to the John Deere Operations Center. And then also, so literally you can set boundary lines, set AB lines right before that planter hits the field, and that operator for that planter can come into the field and grab a line and go.
Yep. So as you look at kind of how Gators are progressing into the portfolio of tools on the farm, like we talked about earlier, the first one that you came out with, is just the four wheels in the back and the one wheel in the front. And that was what it was for. You're just driving around, making sure you're taking care of little things that are out there. And those things have slowly progressed up to where we're at today. And it's as integral into the farming operation now as a tractor is, if you really start to think about the functionality of a Gator. As you look at how Gators are progressing forward, what do you see for Gators as we move into the future, and how much more do you feel they're going to really incorporate deeper into the farming operation?
Yeah, I think what we're doing from a development perspective, research and development to develop Gator utility vehicles is really done on the foundation of work, and primarily our producer segment. And what what we hear from customers definitely goes into the design of these machines. Technology is a big part of that. Precision transport, data collection, it all plays into how we look at our Gator utility vehicles for the future. And today, our Gator utility vehicles drive up to 50 miles an hour. So we've been talking about Gators of the past. Want to make sure your audience knows that these aren't the old 25-mile-an-hour Gators anymore. We've got a very capable machine that can be productive and obviously very efficient with technologies.
Yep. So I'll just talk a little bit about some stuff on inside the Gator, outside the technology side of it. There's a lot of different side by sides that are out there that that have cabs and heat and air and those kind of things. But I will say, of all the ones that I've been around, John Deere's cabs are the most comfortable and the most they seal up nicely, right? You get when it's the air conditioner works great. I have to run it on low or I'll freeze myself out. And if I crank it up too high, I'm going to burn myself out in the wintertime. So when you're looking at how you're designing those things, talk a little bit about the functionality of a Gator from the creature features that are inside of
Yeah, we hear a lot from our customers at shows and events, farm shows, folks that just sit in the cab in a stationary environment without the machine even running. And whether those folks own competitive machines or Deere machines, the HVAC cab has been a game changer in the industry. And those comments they typically give are shared with the ones that you're saying. Just the roominess of it.
Yep.
It's very spacious. It's meant to sit three people wide. We have that display inside with plenty of room for occupants to be able to sit in it. Ideally, we want to make producers as comfortable as possible when they're working, just as we do with our large ag equipment. So making sure that the air conditioning is staying cool might seem kind of trivial or simplistic in nature, but there's a lot that goes into that, as well as making sure when it's cold out that you're staying warm inside, and really that helps the machine run better if it's not working harder to cool or heat a cab that isn't sealed as well. And we get compliments on that, on where the fan speed is on a Gator versus fan speed on some other machines, and there's some really other neat creature comforts inside those Gators, including a sound system that folks can enjoy and keep their mind off of maybe being frustrated at how the day is going. Bluetooth capabilities, so if you need to be talking to folks, you can do that inside that machine as well.
Yep. One of the things too I like about the Gator compared to other models that are out there is the motorized dump bed that's there, and that makes a big difference. You're not going to put 2,000 pounds back there and dump it by any means, but it is big enough to where if you had some, a little bit of dirt or a little bit of gravel or something like that you need to take, you do have the capability to help efficiently raise that up and not kill your back trying to lift that bed up to dump it. Talk a little bit about some of that stuff, that thought process behind some of that stuff.
Yeah. So the cargo box was redesigned with the 845 and 875, and we've had a dump, electric over hydraulic dump actuator with our Gators in the past, and really for anybody doing any work where they need to remove things from their cargo box of any weight, really it's recommended to order that option. It's a lifesaver. It's awesome. Another thing we did in the back of that cargo box, there's for a lot of folks that use sprayers on the farm, there is a 12-volt SAE power outlet that's actually within the cargo box. So you're not having to wire and hook up your sprayer, back to the battery, which might not be the safest way to do things. And it's not very efficient either to be doing that. So we have a power switch on the dash for that. That turns that live power to that connection in the back of the cargo box, and it's really a cool feature that I don't know of any other competitors have right now.
Yep, yeah, very very neat. Well, I will say this: you set the Gator up to be a true work vehicle on the farm, and you have the ability to do a lot of things inside of that. I've been very impressed how the progression of the Gator has gone. and how you just like everything else that Deere has done so far, it's been very targeted toward how we're going to make our farmers more efficient. And I think the Gator is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and like you asked before about where we're headed, we listen to our customers, and we're going to get better with our utility vehicles, just as we get better with all the equipment that we produce based on customer feedback. We rely on our testing, right? But our customers are the ultimate test, and the feedback they provide is extremely valuable. So we appreciate all the John Deere customers out there.
Right. Well, Eric, I appreciate you being on the podcast. How do people find more information about the Gator, and where can they get that information at?
Yeah, so great place to find a lot of information 24 hours a day, most certainly deere.com. Visit that website, search up Gators. You'll find the full line of Gator utility vehicles in addition to the 845 and 875 we've been talking about. And across the countryside, you should be able to find a John Deere dealer near you. Go visit a John Deere dealer or learn more about John Deere Gators.
Right on. Well, Eric, I appreciate you being on the podcast. Hopefully we can talk again soon, and take care of yourself.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me.
Right on. Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Mark your calendars for the 2025 Moving Iron Summit, September 24th through the 26th in Austin, Texas. We'll dig into what's happening in the used equipment market and how dealers are adjusting. It's a chance to connect with others in the industry, share what's working, and get a better handle on what's ahead. You want to be part of the 2025 Summit? Visit movingironllc.com for all the info.
Hello, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. Got Aaron Finn on here to talk about what's happening in the equipment space. Aaron, how you doing, bud?
I am pretty darn terrific, sir.
Pretty darn terrific. Can't really beat that. You know what
It's summer. It's summer. It's hot.
Too bad you're not pretty, though.
I know.
That's hilarious.
I know.
Funniest thing I've heard today.
Can't have it all, man.
No, you can't. You can't. Like I tell my wife, I'm more than a pretty face.
That's right. There's a whole lot of substance to it.
There's so many layers here. You can't get away from it.
You know what else has a lot of layers?
What's that?
Ogres. Much like onions.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yes, it is summer. It turned off hot. We had our first blast of heat here. I think Friday it was 105 or something like that.
Yeah, Thursday, Friday, Saturday it was 95 plus.
And then typical Nebraska weather, Panhandle weather. It was 75, and I think I was outside Monday morning, enjoying the morning before I went and got ready for work. And I think it was like 47 degrees or something like that. It was it's that time of the year. So
I had a hoodie on last night.
Yeah, it's that's one cool thing about living out here, though, man. You do get a bereavement from the heat. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
yeah, every night.
105,
you never have that. You walk out at night and go, ugh, like where you and I both grew up.
Right.
Like it was 100 today, and you walk outside at midnight and it's 85.
Right. Yeah.
Because the heat never leaves.
Never leaves.
It's all encompassed by that beautiful humidity. Out here, it's 105, and by the time it's like 7 p.m. and the sun's at a 45-degree angle, it already starts cooling off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very desert climate. And
hashtag no soybeans.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I always tell my kids, like, whatever the low is, just take it times 2, and that's probably going to be the high. So
it is.
We're close.
Yeah. Like, you see that meme a lot of times. It must be harvest season. And the guy's in a t-shirt, but there's like a winter coat in the pickup and a flannel shirt in the pickup because you change layers like 4 times through the day.
Yep.
That's like the middle of summer here.
It could be, yeah.
Like I have never been out baling and not had a hoodie in the pickup because you get out of that tractor at 2 a.m. or whatever, and whew, it's chilly.
It is chilly, yeah, for sure.
Especially with no air conditioner, it's warmer in the cabin than it is outside.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of which, the tractors and cabs, whatnot. This is the time of the year when I've always noticed you get a peak up in 4-wheel drive activity, and the next time you get that peak up, just like everything else, you get that end of the year peak up.
Right.
Going into the first of the year. And it feels like to me, 4-wheel drives to me are a man. Whew, hiccups there. Start over again. Four-wheel drives to me are a time. This is the time of the year where they're very fickle in their time frame as far as selling go. Now, different parts of the country, that's a mainstay tractor, those kind of things. But if you're not in the wheat belt, four-wheel drives aren't necessarily a mainstay of a tractor. But when you start getting outside that, four-wheel drive tractors start becoming more things than just tillage tractors and big, air seeder tractors, those kind of things. They start becoming, you got planter tractors and you got grain car tractors and so on and so forth. They've really kind of flipped the script a little bit as to what the traditional four-wheel drive place on a farm has turned into over the years. But right now, if you look at where the market's at, it feels like you're seeing some movement on four-wheel drives. Now, I had this theory, and it's one of those theories, and it goes back to no-till farming, those kind of things, that there's a rotation of planters and four-wheel drives that kind of come into play, right? You've got when weed control, weed pressure, and those kind of things really gets to a point where they guys have to go back in and every 5 or 6 or 7 years, got to go back in and kind of till things up a little bit.
Right.
Planter market fades, four-wheel drive market picks up, right? And then as that starts to slowly flip back, you start seeing the sprayer market come back up and the four-wheel drive market kind of fade a little bit. But where four-wheel drives are at in the marketplace now, they're not just a tillage tractor anymore. They're not just a big horsepower machine anymore. They're a planting tractor. There's all kinds of things that they're doing four-wheel drives on the farm right now.
Oh, exactly.
So, which goes back to the specs that you're starting to see to become more and more prevalent on four-wheel drives, one of which is PTOs. You're seeing more and more PTOs now than you ever have. When I first started out, a PTO on a four-wheel drive was like, oh my God, why would they? That's so awesome. There's a PTO on the four-wheel drive. And now it's pretty much a standard option when you start looking at that stuff.
Right. You think back to, let's go back to the aught series. Okay. The first 9,000s. So in the aught series, you'd see a 91, 92 with PTO.
Right.
Maybe 3-point. You go to the 20 series, okay. Now it's starting to be a little more rare to not find a 91 or 92 20 with PTO.
Right.
Most likely also 3-point. And a lot of 93s have PTO, sprinkling in 94s. You go to the 30s, finding a 92 or 93 30 bareback is more odd than finding one with everything on it.
That's true.
Now,
that's true.
That is very geographically focused too, to say that.
Very much.
Out here, by the time the 30s showed up, that was a planting tractor. Every 9330, just about every 9330 sold out of this place was row crop rubber, 3-point PTO, maximum number of remotes. That's how they're set up, which became the 9410, which became the 9420, on down the line, the 9R 490. Point about how tractors are set up. It used to be, well, under 300 horse, better make sure it's got PTO so we can at least use it on the grain cart. Then it became, well, if it's under 400, let's make sure it's got PTO. Now, I would say, even back to the second generation of 9R, you really start seeing, if it's under 500 horse, it's got 3-point PTO.
Well, at least PTO, for sure.
Yeah, at least PTO. 3-point is still very geographically focused. You'll see 3-point in the Corn Belt because that's a planting tractor.
Yeah.
And, if you don't have a DB deer or the big case, odds are it's the 2-point, your 2-point deer hitch. So that's why guys have 3-point on there. That's really it. Maybe they'll pull a ripper, but there again, in most of the Corn Belt, a ripper is pull type.
Yep.
Pull type ripper does a better job. Mm-hmm. Up to, go to that second gen of 9R again. I'll go all the way back to the 9Rs coming out. The 30 series was the last, well, I just need some power. So you sell a 9530, a 9630.
Yeah.
But then when you get into the 9R comes out, you know, you got a whole new series and stuff. So it's like that instantly is a mindset shift. And you are going to, every single one of them's got to have big pump. If they are, just about every single one of them better have PTO, maybe the 9560 doesn't need it, but everything else does. And to your point now, if it's under, every single one better be high flow. And
That's for sure.
Hopefully every single one is PTO. If not, the under 500 damn sure better be.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about, I think, two things. One, I think where four-wheel drives have evolved to on the farm to where they're at today is two things. One is that the PTOs are more than just, you know, for grain carts and those kind of things. There's a lot of instances where they can't generate enough hydraulic pressure and enough flow. They have to use an external pump to get things going, and that's why the PTO is such a big part of these machines.
Or it's running a generator.
Yeah, 100%.
Completely unhydraulic related. It's running a generator to power the maize on your planter.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about air seeders for a little bit. I mean, the amount of hydraulic requirements that are on an air seeder now, I mean, you're talking about, because, you know, the birth of high speed everything, right, has changed the direction for which the amount of hydraulics that come in. I remember you and I had a conversation before we even started the podcast. God dang it, 15 years ago, 12 years ago. And we were talking about, you know, four-wheel drive tractors that didn't have high flow capacity. We're talking like that would have been like that line was like 2014, 2015 time frame where a lot of those machines started coming in. We were like, you know, if it doesn't have high flow, how, you know, you start looking 3-4 years down the road, that stuff that's coming out and the hydraulic capacity. Yeah, you've got all the horsepower in the world to pull what you need to do, but do you have the hydraulic capacity to make it work? And that's some of the conversations we were having. Well, if you look at it now, there's absolutely some scenarios where you can get a four-wheel drive where it doesn't have high flow. You don't need high flow. I mean, that don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everything is so hydraulic up now that you can't function without high flow hydraulics. The issue that comes with that is you've narrowed down. You know, we've talked about this too on here, where if you're looking at buying a piece of equipment, you need to look at where that piece of equipment is going to be sold at. And if that's just your area, well, when your area becomes totally oversupplied of that piece of equipment that only sells in your area,
right?
Well, guess what? Your trade value is not going to be worth much beyond that point, right?
Correct.
You have to broaden that out to where you start looking at a holistic marketplace that's going to draw in more buyers into that than just the handful of buyers that are in your immediate area. And I've had the conversation 1,000 times with folks about, well, it drags down horsepower, or it costs more to operate because of fuel costs and this, that, and the other thing. And I say, I hear you what you're saying, and it totally makes sense, and I get where you're coming from. But the grander picture here is what's your trade value going to be worth at the end of the day? And I'm not saying you go out and golden hammer your tractor when you buy it from the factory, but there's just some things that you need to take a look at that will pay dividends down the road. And high flow hydraulics is one of those things.
That's exactly right. That's because the industry is demanding it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't need high flow, all that thing's doing is tillage. I get your standpoint, but typically you should see enough back for what that high flow costs on the front side to make it negligible. Yeah. What does a high pump really cost for extra horsepower? You know,
exactly.
I get what you're saying, because that's the argument we always heard on choppers, on combine.
It's a great example. That's the best example, right?
That's 25 horse, and I don't need it banging around there because we have a stripper head and we just pick corn. That's what we heard forever, right?
Right.
But to that point, if say that running that big pump takes 5 horse, whatever, and it costs $5,000 extra up front, whatever it is between purchase and trade-in is negligible because of the trade-in. Now, if you're in Minnesota, well, no, Minnesota would be a bad example. If you're in western North Dakota, yeah, you can, that you get a small 4-wheel drive, say like a 490 size,
Sure.
something under 500 horse with big giant rubber on it and a 2-stick shifter. That's probably great. You can get by with that all day long. Owner, operator, the whole thing. But where on earth do you go with that tractor?
Exactly. I think
I can remember 10 years ago, the first generation of the 9Rs. I can remember some of those co-op agronomy, ASP fall fertilizing tractors.
Oh yeah.
They put 24 speeds in them to make them cheap.
Yep.
Remember that? Oh boy, you want to talk about hard on taking it
because you've narrowed it down so tight as to what you're doing there. And I think let's go back to the combine example you talked about.
The problem is because it's a late model rig, you have a high dollar tractor.
Right. Yeah. They're the guy that's looking for the economy style piece of equipment. That's who fits that, right? And it's a small group of people. So the thing about that I think is that is important. Let's go back and talk about that combine example with the chopper versus spreader combine. Okay, so go open the price pages, sit down and take a look at that. If you look at what the difference between the chopper and the spreader in the marketplace in the price book, it's been a while since I've looked, but it's like 25 grand difference, right? 30 grand difference in that.
I bet it's way more than that now, but yeah.
So that shows you how long it's been since I looked at it. But it's been one of those things where but if you go look at what it's out in the marketplace, how that spread is, the difference between a used one and a new one isn't 25 or 30 grand, right? It's not that difference in the spec. It's broadened, right? It's probably $40,000 or $50,000 difference now. When you start looking at the price of the machine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, the important part of that I think that is what you're doing. So you save $25,000, but now when you go back in and you look at what it's worth, you're changing that dynamic by twice the difference now, and not just the 25 grand, right?
Right.
So now you're broadening that out. Now, the same thing on any specs that you look at, right? No, there's certain specs on every machine that make a difference in what the machine looks like. But also at the end of the day, it comes down to what is it that you're doing with this piece of equipment? And secondly, the conversation you should be having is, okay, so if I get this set up to do specifically the job that I want it to do, I buy a 4-wheel drive tractor and all I do is really pack silage with it. Right. That's a different animal than, hey, I'm going to run a grain cart, and hey, I'm going to do some tillage work, and hey, I'm going to plant with it, and all these different things that are coming in. If you're just buying a 4-wheel drive to pack silage with, there's two things it needs to have, right? It needs to have a lot of weight, and it needs to have flotation tires. That's what it needs, right?
Right.
If it's anything other than that, then that's just an extra thing, right?
But that, just as a quick side note, the packing tractor is typically not on a roll. You know what I mean?
You'd be surprised by that, dude.
No, I get that. I know that. I know what you're saying. But I mean, by and large, if you were to put every packing tractor in a box, the majority are not in a roll, is what I'm saying. Versus the majority of, high flow PTO, Firestone rubber, set up perfect, I-state tillage tractors are not.
Right.
Those are
good point.
More apt to be part of a multi.
Yeah, good point.
So the packing tractor can be a little more plain because it might be out there till 4,000 hours, not 400 hours.
Well, I think that's just the point that you have to do. If you have something that's going to be niched for your farm, that's different than, hey, I want it to be, I'm a packing tractor, right? And I need it to be X, right? That's when you start having the conversation of, do I just need a big dumb animal out here, or do I need something that is dialed in, is going to be, it's got a degree from Harvard, right? I mean, what do I need, right? And I think that's the.
So you're saying, do I need a guard or a tight end?
Guard, because they're the intelligent one out there. But if you had the as you look at those things and how they go through, if that's what you're going to do, I would personally take a hard look at every X number of hours. I'm going to trade that, not every season, right? Every 400 hours, 500, whatever that is, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 hours, whatever that number is, right? That's when I would be looking at working those machines, because again, it comes back to, hey, this is a niche machine. And once you get to a certain hour level on machines, you have a completely different buyer, right? Just like we talked about earlier, you have economy buyers, and then you have those super high spec buyers, right? That are these guys that want to buy this. And on both sides of that spectrum, those are the fringe buyers, right? So you've got 10 or 15% of the market down here, and you got 10 or 15% of the market up here, and you've got that other 70 to 80% in the middle somewhere that are looking for a combination of those things. So as you're going through that, that's what you're doing. So if it's the pack and tractor, stay with the pack and tractor example. If you're staying with that specific unit, that unit is going to find a home for somebody else that's packing silage on a smaller scale than what you were doing, right? When you bought it brand new, right? They're going to be that used buyer that's looking for something that, it may be the same scale too, but it also could be a smaller scale operation where they're looking for the value and to go out and do it. So understand what that looks like and what those marketplaces look like. Make all the difference in the world when you go out and buy that machine, right? It's just like buying pickups or anything else, right? There's the, the whatever, the Denali HD 3/4 ton high country, whatever, over here, right?
AT4X.
Right? And then you've got your basic work truck, right? That has, and the only reason it doesn't have crank windows is because they quit making them. They quit making them, right? And that's where it's at. And that's the kind of stuff that you're looking at when you're looking at those things. Like you're weighing that out, and there's a market for both. You just have to make sure when you look at that market for both, that what's that look like? How's that impact your current marketplace? What's your ability to sell outside of that if this current marketplace is saturated?
Right.
I think those are the conversations that you have to have. Now, all that being said, what you see more than not on the marketplace is either it's really, really high spec or it's really, really low spec. And
very true.
There's not that middle ground where it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we kind of make this tight package, which also affects the marketplace. And I think we're seeing some of that now. If you look at the amount of row crop tractors on the marketplace, if you go pull the codes on those row crop tractors, they're going to be 85% alike, maybe 95, maybe 90% alike, and it's that other 10 or 15% that's it's got the whatever, the heated floor mats and the vibrating massage seat and shit like that,
or you get to highlight it because it's more plain, and highlight that buyer. In the last 10 years, we as an industry have done such a good job of pushing everybody to every spec.
Right.
Because we want our used machines perfect.
Yeah, you want to come back at a certain level. So
I want all my used tractors to be ILS, IVT, Firestones, all the weight, all this stuff.
Right.
Signature, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Then that's what everybody has. So you get your guy that calls and, man, I know they probably don't have one, but I need a 8R310 with a straight axle, because we're going to put a dozer on it, and I don't want ILS and whatever reasons on and on. But you get half excited because you're like, ooh, I have one.
Right.
And that's something not every single person has, versus I want to load it up 8R340. So I'm the 17th call today.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you want to sell this or not? I got quite a list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Well, I think that too. And that was one thing I always encouraged at the dealership, was always encouraging. You and I talked about this a million times, was if you have a customer that's a huge roll guy and they've got a million different machines coming in off of lease, that customer typically doesn't care what the specs of the machines are. They really don't.
You can experiment with what you do for your used offering by what you throw into there.
Yep.
If those guys are open-minded to it.
Yeah, and you mix in different hour ranges and those kind of things, but also, and different models, horsepower requirements are a different thing. That's a whole different animal when you start talking about that stuff. But how you spec those machines working with a guy that's got, hey, say they got 8 tractors, right? You have 2 of them that are
Right.
really high spec, and you have 2 of them that are really low spec, and now you've got 4 in the middle that are kind of a hodgepodge of high spec, low spec, and but they're not the highest spec and not the lowest spec. There's something in the middle, and you're kind of experimenting with those different things to see what comes out. And what that does is now you've opened up your entire portfolio to everybody, and not just, hey, this guy's wanting to buy economy, cheap. This guy's wanting to buy, the highest spec stuff that he can find, and those kind of things. So I think there's something in the middle for everybody. You just got to find what that looks like.
Well, and you got to be careful with that a little bit too, because I have done that in the used game.
And you end up with something left over if you're not careful.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yep.
What your last roll, you have, man, everything's loaded up, everything's gorgeous, perfect, but they're just not rolling out of here like they used to. Let's mix it up a little bit. Not everything's got to be fancy and blah, blah, blah. So you do, 3 rigs ILS IVT, you do a couple ILS power shift, you do a 1500 power shift, and then some 13s. And you did that because not everybody wants the fancy ones. So let's get, and the more base not the more base, but the less they have for options, the cheaper they typically are. So that's in your favor. And you do that, and everybody gobbles up the loaded up ones, and you sit there going, now what?
Yeah.
I've had that happen. So you got to kind of massage that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So I think, long story short, understand on both sides what your marketplace looks like. And if you're talking with a customer, explain what the current state of a certain spec is, and then what's it look like outside that spec. And ultimately at the end of the day, you want everyone to win. I think that's what understanding your specs, especially on 4-wheel drives and combines, those kind of things, but what those specs look like.
Right.
And what are the needs for your area versus what are the needs for the overall marketplace. And I think that's kind of the
couple things I always tell guys. The internet has made the next door neighbor a global marketplace. The other thing is, the first thing I tell guys when we're looking at machinery and start talking numbers of the deal and everything else is, what's the end of the movie?
Right.
Let's discuss that up front, because that should have an impact on what you do now.
All right, Aaron, that's a good place to stop. If folks want to reach out to you, get some of that stuff over there at the High Plains Wholesale, where you're the Chief Entertainment Officer, CEO. What's the best place to do that?
Well, I'm not sure if it's Chief Entertainment Officer or Cheap Entertainment Officer.
Could be that too. Yeah,
could
be that too.
We got a little deal going on Facebook there. For now, it'll be coming to other places here before long, but on Facebook, it's High Plains Wholesale Equipment. Got some videos, listings on there. You can reach out to me through there. You can call me or text me, 308-760-1193, or you can shoot me an email anytime, afintel1l at 21equip.com.
Sounds good, man. Well, Aaron, I appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next time. A special thanks to Big Machinery Pete Peterson, Aaron Fennell, and Chip Nellinger for being on the podcast, talking about what's going on there. I want to thank John Deere for being the sponsor for this podcast. So till next time, I'm Casey Seymour. Let's go be smart, folks. Out.